Hey, I'm Felissa Rose, and you're watching Keto and Crime.
Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Crime. Today we've got what I intended to be a Keto and Crime quickie. However, it may turn out to be much, much longer because there's a lot more to the story than would meet the eye. Today, by popular request, and I'll be perfectly honest, this is a topic I did not want to cover just because it's so dark and we've been through so much dark history lately, and also it can be highly political. It's almost impossible to talk about this without getting political. So forgive me for that. I will do my best, but I did not want to cover this. But today we're going to be talking about the Xinjiang province of China and the Uyghur Muslims and the atrocities that are happening there right now. We're going to talk about the history of it, why it's happening, and how the CCP is managing to cover it up, because they are. And with that being said, we're going to dive into this. Hey everyone, I want to tell you about a great new sponsor for the channel, Keto Crisp. They reached out to me wanting to help me get back on my keto journey. As you know, I've had some issues and they know that sweets are a problem for me. So I have partnered with them after sampling them, and they are really good bars. I highly recommend them. Filling, not too sweet, but just sweet enough. So if you're on a keto or a carnivore or low carb lifestyle, they are the perfect bar. But moreover, what I want to talk about is the company itself. Adam Brennan is the founder, and he has suffered from cerebral palsy as well as obesity most of his life, and yet he still persevered and founded his own company. I think just the whole Keto Crisp brand is a monument to the human spirit, and I just wanted to point that out, that I only choose to partner with brands that I really believe in. I both believe in their product, I believe in Adam, and I really believe in their motto. It's about what you can do, not what you can't. And with that being said, I'm proud to welcome a new sponsor to the channel. You can try them out for a 20% discount. Just like most keto bars, they're a bit pricier than the junk you're going to find in the supermarket, but well worth it. And so you can get 20% off using my discount code, which I will link down in the description below. And I look forward to doing many more collaborations with Keto Crisp. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, what you're looking at right now is a model of China with the Xinjiang province. Excuse me, I will do my best to pronounce all these accurately, but if I don't, please forgive me. Province connected. As you can see, it's in the northern westernmost part of China, and it borders essentially the entire Middle East, as well as even Russia there up above it. And the reason that this particular province is so important to the Chinese Communist Party is because it is literally where the old Silk Road from early history ran, where all the trade routes between the Far East and the Middle East and even Europe ran. And so,
but there's another reason, and it has to do with China's ambitious economic project known as the Belt and Road Initiative.
5年前我提出了共建“一带一路”的倡议。
Loosely based on the historic Silk Road, this vast collection of infrastructure projects seeks to connect China with Africa and Europe. This would significantly expand China's economic influence. It spans over 70 countries and will cost hundreds of billions of dollars.
Xinjiang is sort of central to Xi Jinping's grand project. That project is Xi Jinping's sort of signature foreign policy. And therefore Xinjiang is so important to that he just does not want any trouble coming from Xinjiang.
that's why this particular province is so important to them. It is literally the gateway to the West. China is becoming, as we all know, a world power, and part of that power is two things. They are increasing trade with other nations, or trying to, and they are even doing what you would call diplomatic, humanitarian work, and I use that term very loosely. This is not against the people of China, by the way. This is against their government, not the people of China. In that they are going into other countries, building roads so that these people feel beholden to China, and will in the future perhaps trade with them. So China is very good at playing the long game. You got to remember that. And the history of this particular province and the Uyghurs is indicative of the fact they are very good at playing the long game. So that's what they're up to. And this area is the gateway to all of that, into the West, into the Middle East, and then over into Europe, and then eventually into North America. This is the gateway. And so it is imperative that they keep this province clear, they keep it thriving, and they have that gateway they so long in rebuilding the Silk Road of old. So that's why this province is so important. This province is heavily resourced, a lot of natural gas here. I'm sure a lot of oil, because where there's natural gas, there's oil. There's all sorts of other things like gold, silver, other precious metals. And it's just very, very profitable type of land to have. However, China did not always own this. This particular slot of land, as far back as we can remember, have been the source of many wars have been fought over this. Because it does border other Muslim countries in the Middle East, this land has traditionally been 90% Muslim, and a particular type of Muslim called the Uighurs. They are very Turkish in their belief systems and in their culture, and in their dress and everything else that goes along with that. So that has primarily been who has inhabited this, because it has changed hands so many times. There's been wars between all the bordering countries you can see over this land, as well as Tibet. Tibet fought the natives of this country many years ago as well, trying to take control of it. And of course, as we know, Tibet did fall to the Chinese Communist Party. But so that's kind of the history. It's always been vastly sought after, and always been a source of conflict in this area. And with that being said, let's dive into the rest of the story. And what is the rest of the story? Well, let's just say that after a lot of turmoil in the area, and a lot of countries trying to take control of that very natural resource-rich area, that finally in 1949, you can officially say that the People's Republic of China did take control of it. And it was pretty much left to live in its autonomy, because, Chinese government, the Chinese empire was just starting to rise, so they had more important things to worry about at the time. So they pretty much left the province and its people alone. Now let's talk about the people in this province. As I said, they are known as the Uigurs. They are more Turkish than Chinese. That's pretty much been established. And at the time that China took over, they were around 89 to 92% of the population of this area. And then in the 1950s and 1970s, we're talking just after the Cultural Revolution in China, where the Communist parties pretty much took over and pretty much set China on the current path that it's on. They decided to make use of this territory by flooding it with Han Chinese. Now, Han Chinese is simply the cultural majority that lives in China. These are the average Chinese person that, I mean, it's nothing against them. They were used as pawns in this just as much as the Uighurs. So I'm not sending any hate out to the Chinese people, but much like in the 1800s, when the United States and even Canada was trying to take over their western territories, their western states, they put incentives for the average American, average Canadian, to move into that area and begin to culturally make it American, make it Canadian. Same thing here. The only difference is that what happened in the United States and Canada happened in the 1800s. This happened in the 1900s with, cameras and everything else being able to be fixed on it, as well as more concise histories written. So they did make incentives for the Han Chinese to start relocating into the western, why is it always the west? It's always the west that gets this. Western part of whatever, you're going to be eventually culturally stampeded, just let you know. But they incentivized the Han Chinese moving into this area by offering incentives to move there. And so by the 1950s to 1970s, you have a huge migration of the Han Chinese into Xinjiang. And with all of that, of course, there's going to be issues. They didn't do this alone. The Soviet Union had been the one to help the Chinese take this land to begin with, so they had a lot of help there from the former Soviet Union. So anyway, you had all of these Han Chinese moving in. You had them establishing businesses, putting up homesteads, doing the things that you do when you settle a part of your country. And with that being said, you had the Uighurs, as I said, which were more Turkish, more Middle Eastern than Chinese, seeing this being a detriment to their culture, a culture that they had been there for hundreds, even not thousands of years, since Genghis Khan. They decided they didn't like this very much, and just like the native Canadians or the indigenous peoples of Canadian in the United States, they put up a fight. And among this, you had several resistance parties to the Chinese rising up. Most importantly, the East Turkestan People's Party in 1968. And the Soviets, always wanting to play hero to both sides, supported this in their endeavors against the Chinese Communist Party. And so from 1970 to as late as 1997, you had very organized rebellions of the Uighurs against the Han Chinese in their province. You had a lot of bombings, a lot of killings, stereotypical stuff that you would see in, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. Just, suicide bombings, car bombs, organized riots with weapons. You saw it all. It was, if you were a Han Chinese living in that area, you would very much say, this is terrorism. This is terrorism. I don't like it. So you saw the same kind of guerrilla warfare going on as you saw in, the Plains Wars in the United States in the 1800s, just on a more modern scale. The Chinese military was able to put down a lot of these large-scale rebellions, and so it settled down. And then finally you had a second wave in 2009 where riots broke out between Uyghur and Han Chinese workers at a factory in Xinjiang, and a violent dispute caused over 100 deaths. And then you had other attacks. You had syringe attacks, you had bomb and knife attacks, literally people stabbing each other with syringes loaded with God knows what, and you had lots of car bombs through 2014, and this is when the Chinese government decided no more, we're going to completely take it over, we're going to saturate these Muslim separatists with our own culture, we're going to indoctrinate them, we're going to make them Chinese so that this doesn't happen again. And you basically had what is known as the People's War on Terrorism, actually mandated by the Chinese government. And from there, Xinjiang would never be the same. From 2014 to now, the province has become a modern-day 1984 surveillance state. As you can see from this footage, that the Uighurs have a much different culture as the others. It's much like the indigenous tribes versus modern Americans and modern Canadians. Lots of conflict. And so to cut down on that, the Chinese government has launched basically a campaign to stop terrorism in this country. And I think we know, enough about the modern war on terrorism to know that doesn't always work, nor is it always the best idea. But basically, the whole province has become a modern-day surveillance state. Their whole purpose is to prevent crime, to prevent these terrorist things from happening, to make the Uyghurs like the Han Chinese. And so they've done this in two ways: advanced surveillance and a strong military presence. Literally, they have advanced facial recognition systems. They have checkpoints wherein if you live in these provinces, you have to go through them, have everything scanned right down to your cell phone. If you are caught with any type of app or heard speaking about anything that could be anti-CCP, you are arrested for what is known as a pre-crime. I guarantee you this is right out of 1984. This is stereotypical Big Brother is watching you. And from here, they have allowed, with all this indoctrination and all the military presence, the Uyghur population has dropped from 90-something% down to about half now. Through death, through people leaving and becoming refugees in the neighboring Middle Eastern countries, where they're still treated as an underclass there as well. So there's no winning for these people, it seems. And now the most horrific part of the Chinese strategy is the concentration or the assimilation camps. Education and re-education training camps, as they're so wonderfully called.
Many Uyghurs have been detained in camps. China has spent hundreds of millions of dollars building at least 90 new compounds like these. People can be imprisoned for many reasons, or none at all.
We don't quite know how many people are in these camps, but probably the latest figures are at least 1 million people are in camps. Now, that's of the order of 1 in 6 of the adult population. That's an enormous number.
Inside, Uyghurs are brainwashed. There are also reports of inmates being tortured.
According to the survivors' personal account, they're forcing Uyghurs to denounce their religion. You have to allow us to convert you, to be reformatted, reprogrammed, to become just another Han Chinese.
China's official line is that the camps are designed to re-educate extremists and fight terrorism.
And in these camps, they are taught Han Chinese culture. That is, they are forced to give up their native Uyghur tongue and forced to learn Mandarin or any of the other Chinese dialects that the Chinese Communist Party considers culturally appropriate. They are taught Han Chinese ways of dress. And according to the Chinese government, they're taught skills to find job in a Chinese culture, which is unusual to me because these people have been living and working in their province for hundreds of years. They know how to work and make money. But in any case, they are now taught what the Chinese government considers appropriate from them. And according to most of the reports and very limited reports coming out of there, these are menial labor jobs. In fact, there's a huge belief that these people are constricted to help build the roads in other countries to help forward the Chinese long game of creating more trade partners. So these people, in my opinion, are modern-day slaves. And why isn't there an uproar about this today? Well, 2 reasons. The Chinese Communist Party controls the news coming out of China with an iron fist, pun absolutely intended. Everything is sterilized, filtered before it ever reaches the West, so our view of these camps can be somewhat sterile. In fact, the people that have been allowed to visit these camps have seen their flagship camps that do appear to be better like high schools, like colleges, everybody neat, everybody clean, everybody smiling, I'm sure under force of gunfire.
Muslim re-education camps the way the Chinese wanted us to see them on a tightly controlled tour earlier this year. And we've seen glimpses from leaked videos like this one. China says the camps stop Muslim Uyghurs from becoming extremists and offer free job training. But now an inside look in the Chinese government's own words. A leaked 9-page memo reads like a how-to manual, telling officials to strictly implement measures to prevent escape. That means 24/7 video surveillance, watchtowers, and double-locked doors.
The headline is, "We're doing something really nasty to a lot of people and it's secret."
Adrian Zenz is a German researcher who's considered an authority on China's detention of ethnic minorities.
Did someone take a huge risk in leaking these documents?
In Xinjiang, people have been sentenced to death for much less.
Zenz estimates up to 1.8 million Uighurs and other Muslim minorities have been sent to the camps since 2017.
So that's what we see. And also the biggest reason is the rest of the world is so reliant on China. The West has become consumers. That's all we do. And so the majority of the stuff we consume comes out of China. If we lose our trade agreements with China, we're pretty much sunk. So that is why the United Nations and other countries have basically turned a blind eye. We do see about 40 countries in the world today putting trade sanctions against China. But the only way this is ever going to be handled is if either very strict regulations or even military sanctions are put against the Chinese to destroy these camps. You even have Disney, when they filmed the updated version of Mulan, thanking these camps for allowing them to film there. Thanking a concentration camp. How far have our ideals fallen to allow this to go on just because of trade agreements? If I have to pay, 3 times for an item, I'm happy to do that if these people can be free. That's the way I look at it. But not everybody feels that way. Some nations can't do that. So, with that being said, that's the current state of the Uighurs in the Western Chinese provinces, and it's a sad state. I'm going to end this with that being said, that is a very cursory overview of the Uighurs in China, and I hope it's opened your eyes. And with that being said, Keto and Krime.